Hello. Today we are going to talk to Julie McGue. She's coming to us from Chicago. And Julie has two books. So please do tell us about those books, Julie. We'll put links to them in our show notes and
Yeah.
then we'll hear your story.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello. Welcome.
Thank you. Well, good timing to talk about the first book, which is Twice a Daughter, A Search for Identity, Family, and Belonging. It was 3 years old last weekend, Mother's Day weekend.
Happy birthday to your book.
I know, happy birthday book. It's a story of my twin sister and I, and the journey that we went on to find our birth mother and also other birth relatives.
Were
And
you
then the second,
were
go
you
ahead.
raised together? Not to tell your
We
story
were.
yet? Okay.
Oh, good.
Yes,
Curious on that.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really key part of the story. And then Belonging Matters launched in November of 23, and it's a collection of essays. I like to think of it as a just kind of a companion guide to Twice a Daughter, because a lot of things happened after I wrote Twice a Daughter that people had questions about. So in that book, I have essays about, what's closed adoption versus open adoption.
Mm.
What's the meaning of family? How does family reunions affect an adoptee in their sense of belonging? Difficult conversations that I had with my adoptive parents about my search, and also with my birth mom about some of the things that happened in our reunion. So it's a companion guide to Twice a Daughter. And
That's
then I have
that's actually very neat. I've never heard someone doing that. That could be a
yeah,
good resource for people. Yeah.
I think it could be, because there's a lot of things that we think about as adoptees that other people, like family reunions, the reunions we're invited to as part of our adoptive families, but then the ones we're not invited to
Right.
as members of our birth family. So that was a trigger point for me that I didn't see coming until after I found my birth relatives. So, yeah. And then I have a third book coming out in February of
You are
25.
prolific.
Yeah. Good for
Ah,
you.
yeah, sense of purpose, right? It is the prequel to Twice a Daughter. So many people that read that book wanted to know, well, what was it like growing up as a twin and an adopted person in this big Irish Catholic family that was half adoptees and half my parents' biological kids? So that book was a long time in the making, but it'll come out next February.
I'll
Well,
be curious
excited.
to hear
Yeah.
your story. I imagine that having your twin maybe made things a little bit smoother as an adoptee, having
Abs
somebody rather than feeling so alone in it.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. And I give Catholic charities full credit for their policy of keeping adopted twins together and placing them in the same family. I cannot even imagine what life would have been like to find out I had a twin and were separated
Mm.
from her.
I
Between
mean,
And
did you
illnesses.
see three
Yeah.
identical strangers?
Absolutely. And I felt that viscerally in my heart,
Mm.
how
Mm.
awful that loss would have been to me personally. Um, yeah, so I know what a privilege it was to
Yeah.
grow up with a full sibling. I have a brother 2 years younger, not biological brother, also adopted through Catholic Charities. And because the three of us were the oldest, we were a little pack. We understood, even though we were very different, that we had this common bond between us, and we had each other's back through life. My parents did a great job of assimilating all six of us. Um, strict Catholics. They had, you had your chore list and you got your allowance on Friday. And if you didn't do
Right.
all your chores, you didn't get all of your allowance. So they
Where
treated all of
where
us.
were you? Let's start from the beginning.
Yeah. Let's hear.
Where were you?
I grew up in the western suburbs of Chicago, a little town called LaGrange. Um, my parents were not well off, and they had so many infertility issues, which I go into in my third book, all the family building issues that they had from infertility, miscarriages to even a stillborn. And so building their family was so important to them, like so many people in the baby boom era. The bigger the family, it was,
Yeah.
a prestige thing. So, I like to talk about adoption to people outside the circle as, it looks like it's a big, beautiful thing if you're from your adoptive parents' point of view. But there's so much loss baked into the
Yes.
situation.
Yes, I don't know. Have you been able to listen to our podcast?
I do. Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
because we do, talk about that. I don't know if you know, we came out of the fog in real time
Yes, I
doing
did
our
too.
podcast, and so we
Oh, you
do
Yeah.
did?
talk.
You did too?
Yeah, I did too. My coming out of the fog was what started Twice a Daughter. I was 48. I got sent for a breast biopsy, and I came home from that procedure, and my husband said, "It's time. You got to get at this." And I had just, kind of been shoving
Dabbling.
it
Yeah.
in the back of the closet. I dabbled a little bit, but, I had this full sister, so I knew who I looked like. I just didn't know who my kids took after and where some of my traits came from. So yeah, that was the coming out of the fog moment. Okay, I knew one person in high school and one person in college that were adopted, besides my brother. And I had so much to learn. I had stuff to learn about what I thought about it, what was happening in the arena, and writing Twice a Daughter was eye-opening for me as well as my
Yeah.
family.
I'm sure there were many hard conversations along those lines,
Yes.
but that
Yeah,
is,
it was.
yeah, it's good. Is your sister curious? Is she on the journey with you?
Well, she and I never have done anything without her.
Okay.
We talk about everything, and she's a good part of the journey, but I was the one that did the search and
Yeah.
wrote the book. It was funny. I gave her the advanced reader copy, the 4 or 5 months before the book came out, and I said, "So, are you okay with everything I wrote? Are we good?" And she hadn't even read it, and I said, why didn't you read this yet? She goes, I know how it ends. It's okay. I mean, that's our relationship. As twins, we're in this passenger driver
I
situation
have
Mhm.
all the time.
my parents, they're biological. My brothers who are
Right.
biological
Right.
to my parents are twins, so I have
Okay.
watched it, my whole life, and
Yeah. Yeah.
they
I
live in
mean,
the
we're both,
same town, and they're, very connected.
yeah,
Are
very
you
connected.
identical twins?
We found out in the course of the story of Twice a Daughter that we are identical.
Oh,
My parents were told we were fraternal. Just another one of those little boo-boos that they get wrong during the adoption process. Somebody checked the wrong box, or I don't know.
did you look identical?
Oh my gosh, here's the cover of the book. There we
Oh,
are at
yeah, come on.
16. Yeah, come
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
We were just called the Ryan twins, we didn't even have a first name, and we answered. I answered to my sister's name still. It's kind of a funny thing. But the DNA question that you just asked is so fascinating because 23andMe showed that we were identical twins. And because we're identical twins, when my daughter signed up for 23, it showed she had two mothers.
Oh, isn't
Wow.
that interesting?
Yeah, and some of my sister's kids show up higher related to me than a couple of my own children. So, I mean, the DNA, the stripping of
Yeah.
everything that gets passed on is just fascinating. But DNA did not help me find my birth relatives. When I started down this path, it was 2011. The subscriber base to 23andMe and Ancestry was not great. Plus, I didn't have my birth parents' identities because I'm from a closed adoption. So, the names that were coming up were like third and fourth cousins, and because I didn't know who married who and all of that. It was not helpful to me at all. And as I came to find out towards the end of the story, none of my biological relatives would have signed up for any of those sites. That they're just not sharing people, much less sharing DNA.
DNA.
So, yeah. So I really did need all the people, all the search angels.
Did you
that
have
I
any
had.
help from your adopted family? How did they treat adoption? I mean, in general, when you
Oh,
had these conversations and you started to write the
oh,
book.
such a journey for them and me with them. As kids, we had those little chats, came, right around the birthday time. We'd go into the living room and they'd say, we'll support you if you decide to go find information. We all knew there was no information that they hadn't shared. And so I believed them about that. But I had a little inner feeling that they wouldn't be happy if I did test the waters. So it took me a long time.
It's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So then
Seems to be really common in the baby scoop era, right? The
yeah, the
parents told, well, they're
loyalty.
blank slates and they're your children. And so it's
I
not
was going to say
uncommon.
they're pretty progressive to say, oh, I never even had that. Nobody said that to me, but then they weren't really open about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as my social worker that I became really close to through Catholic Charity said, this was the day they didn't ever think was happening. You were close to 50 years old. So they kind of got blindsided. But my dad was cool with it.
Hmm.
He's like, of course. And my mom was like, there's a
Yeah.
chapter in Twice a Daughter called That Woman. And that's how
Oh,
my mom referred to my birth
Oh,
mom.
how is
I
that
do
woman?
that
Yeah.
that woman. And
Ugh.
she comes full circle. I mean, the story is truly a character arc for me, but also for her and our relationship. Because by the end of the story, when I connect with birth relatives who my family knows, because she knows the players,
Oh.
she said, "Oh, this is okay. Let's all go out and have dinner."
Because then she knew who they were because of a small town or
Yes, because of a family connection.
yeah.
I don't want to give away the story for listeners, but we had a family lake house that we went to every summer, and it turns out that my half brother was married to somebody we all knew, and our paths had crossed on occasions. I'm sure. I mean, a lot of your
Yeah.
stories that you ladies cover, there's like, the adoptee grew up a block or two from one of the birth
Yes.
siblings or
yeah.
parents. So yeah, my story is similar to that in that there was this crazy connection, and it was a God wink moment for my mom because she realized, oh, these people are okay. I like them. This can be okay. So it was a
But
very
had she
healing.
not, then it would have been not
It would have been
okay.
I think it would continually be a struggle. I felt like our bond was always tested through this process. I think she was waiting to see how it would change things.
Yeah.
I think my dad worked on her. Like, we always said we would help with this if it came to pass, and now we need to follow through with that. So she had a lot of work to do. She was like so many adoptive parents operating out of fear.
Yeah.
What was she going to lose two daughters? Um, and she didn't. And obviously, it's cute now that she's 91. And when I take her out for doctor's appointments or whatever, we'll go for a cup of coffee. About a couple of months ago, she said, as I was sitting in Panera having a cup of coffee, she said, "So how's your birth mom?" I went, "Wow, okay. I guess we can talk about this openly now." So
That's good to hear. It's good for listeners to hear because I do think so many tune into the podcast that we don't hear from, or just we don't, there's so many listeners that's their big fear is that they'll sever these ties and that there isn't hope that it can get better. And just, she's still going. She's 91. I was just
yeah,
starting to
yeah.
have those conversations with my mom and she passed, but they are
Mm,
important, right? To keep trying and
And it's also
right.
important to point out that, once that especially from this era, adoptees have been
yes,
put in a bad position
yes,
of shouldering the guilt, shouldering the responsibility. I can never let an opportunity go by without mentioning that because it's important.
always. Yep.
And when we are, having these stories as an oral history needs to be said over and over again, because perhaps that will finally enact some change. Anyway, I
Yes,
digress.
I
and
hope.
no, I wanna tag on to that with another little story. So it some of this didn't just happen with my adoptive parents, right? So when I was going down this path, the breast biopsy, I need to find my family history, get the medicals, and it turned out that breast cancer does run in
Mm.
my biological family in a big way. One of my biological aunts had passed away from it. So I needed to figure this out for myself, and collectively my sister and I together have 4 daughters.
Oh,
So it makes a
yes.
big difference
Oh,
to all
wow.
of us to be screened properly and aggressively. So I'm sharing this story with a good friend. She's not in the adoption circle though, so we'll give her that free pass for a second. I'm sharing my story, and she said, you know, don't you feel disloyal to your
I
parents?
know. Yes.
And I looked at her and I thought, you don't get this at all. This is
No.
not about disloyalty. This is about information I need for the safety of my family.
Yeah.
And I think it just astounded me at my age, because I'm 65, that people still don't get
And people,
that.
like that's,
And people
you
and who
think,
know
oh, they
your
must be
story.
open. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
No. So that I think that's what's so important about your podcast.
Yeah.
And for the people that are outside of the circle listening, sit back, listen to the stories, and
Yes,
try and
listen.
put yourself
I like
in that
that.
situation. Listen to hear what's being said, because you don't know. You're not walking in those shoes. We face a lot of obstacles as adoptees growing
We
up.
really do.
That, and then in this adoption search and reunion stuff, it's a battleground.
That's it.
Um,
That's just sometimes the beginning of the
right?
dicey battleground. Yeah.
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 So I
That's a
did.
good message, Julie. I
Thank
like
you.
that. Heard. Yeah.
I think also, birth parents sometimes get a bad rep, but I really have so much empathy for my birth mom, regardless of the fact that it took us a long time to find her. Um, she didn't always give us correct information. It took us a long time to find our birth father, because we had sort of the right name, but not the correct name. But there was so much shame put on the birth parents,
Oh, yeah.
especially the birth
Hmm.
mother in the closed adoption era. And that, even though we found her and we connected with her, it took her a long time to shed some of that shame she felt about having premarital sex and being an unwed mother and hiding that secret under a secret identity, um, to allow us into her life. And it's still hard for her. She's still alive. She's 91.
Oh, she's
Like
also
my,
91.
well, that was the Catholic Charities
Interesting.
thing back
Oh,
then. They tried to match you so closely to
uh-huh.
the families that you came from. So I'll digress for 1 second. I grew up with people saying, "Gosh, you look so much like your mom," and my sister and I would look at each other and go,
Hmm.
okay, maybe, but probably not. And then it turned out when we met our birth mom and she gave us pictures of her, she was 26 when she relinquished my sister and I. She looks so much like my adoptive mom. And so the folks at Catholic Charities knew that. And we looked, we blended in. And that was the whole thing back there, was blending in so that adoption wasn't a stigma to the parents, but also to the child. It was still
Just
kind of a
just you
secret.
saying that she was 26, think of that.
Yeah,
That's
I
pretty
know that
good.
was that wasn't
That's not a
that,
young woman.
N-
That's still so shameful that she has to live through that
yeah,
at
and I think
26.
yeah, and my adoptive mom was 26 at the same time too. So that the
It seems so
parallels of that.
unfair, right? It's like, oh, you're not good enough to raise
Well,
your child, but this 26-year-old is. Like, it's just when you say it so across the board like that, we're not talking 15-year-old,
right, right.
that's another thing. Hmm.
Well, my birth father wouldn't marry her, so
Yeah.
she just really had no resource. She could not be pregnant and raise two daughters by herself, and her family would have disowned her, all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's what
but
I'm
that was,
saying. And what a choice,
Yeah.
right?
what a choice. Yeah, definitely a devastating choice for her. And she carried that with her the rest of her life, because she didn't get married till she was 48. And
No children.
no other
Wow.
kids, no
Yeah.
other kids.
48.
We always say that because people often, say things, well, I met my birth mother. I'm glad I wasn't with her, these things. Well, this changes people and shapes them.
It
So
does.
we don't
She
know that
was
she wouldn't have been a wonderful mother and,
Right.
right, right. And twins ran in her family. So while she knew that was a possibility, I think it really surprised her. And in that era, back in the closed adoption era, she was encouraged not to see or hold my sister. And she took an alias. So the alias was on my original birth record. No birth
I didn't
father's
even
name.
realize that was legal, that you could
It
put a
was.
false name on a birth
Yes.
certificate.
there's a
I
lot
have
of things
honestly have
Yeah.
shady.
that is just I did not I didn't
Mm-mm.
think I could
Her
be surprised by anything, but I did not realize that.
I didn't either.
Yes, and also surprising back then that a birth father's name didn't have to be on
Same, I
the
mean,
Same
yes.
as mine. Yeah.
yeah.
My
And it made adoptions go a lot quicker and easier
uh-huh.
if there was only one person
Right.
signing off their parental rights. Yeah.
Oh my
But
gosh, I'm just
yeah,
We always learn something.
yeah.
What and so
And
what
that
did you find out about your birth father? I'm curious.
well, it took
Eventually.
me It took me about 4 years to get on the right track. I used a genealogist, and I talk about this in Twice a Daughter, who was the only genealogist in the state of Minnesota, which is where my birth parents were from. They had met at this school in Rochester, Minnesota. The genealogist was from Rochester, and she just had all of these connections. She was also adopted, the genealogist.
Oh,
So she
oh
knew how to
wow.
get to the bottom of things. She had friends in the city directories, and she came back to me and she said, I don't think this is the right name that you got. I think this is the guy. So I think you should write him a letter. And that's what happened. She just literally broke open the case, and I sent him a letter. He responded right away
oh,
with my medical history, but also, I don't want anything to do with
oh.
you.
Here's your
Yeah.
medical history. Please leave me
Yeah.
Oh,
alone.
so he hadn't
Bye
changed in
bye.
all these years.
No, he had not. But to my benefit, I have a half brother and a half sister that
From
I didn't
him.
know I
Okay,
had
yeah.
from him. And he told them, there's
Oh,
these two girls, they're out there. And my brother called me.
so
And
they knew before you said. He had always said to them, or he told them after you contacted him?
he told them after I
Oh, okay.
contacted them. He was
Mm.
afraid I was going to contact
Yeah.
them too. And I would have, but my brother called me first. And that's how we figured out that we had this connection to my adoptive family. It sped everything up. My brother did DNA analysis with me, and we determined, yep, without a doubt, we're biological siblings. So my brother didn't have any idea about my sister and I. And we are like such good friends.
Oh,
The four siblings of
Oh,
us.
that's
And
so nice. Do
and
they
the
live
we
near
are,
father,
you?
yeah.
they are like literally like almost in my backyard. They're both in the Chicago
That's
area.
neat.
Um, it's,
But did your birth father didn't soften when you got to know them?
my brother was working on him. And he died of a heart attack,
Oh,
and so it never happened.
sorry.
Oh,
His he had been remarried, so the woman that was his wife was not, as my brother says, she's not crazy about us. So you can imagine how she must feel about two more of
Oh,
his children entering his life. Yeah, so I wanted to go back to my birth parents being 20 in their 20s when they had
yeah.
my sister and I. because this just flabbergasted me. Because of the fantasy that I had growing up as a kid, my sister and I had made up this little story, and it made us feel better. And I know other adoptees do this too. We have these little fantasies about our birth
Ghost,
parents.
Ghost
Mhm.
World, I think it is, right?
Kingdom or
Yeah.
something.
The Ghost Kingdom. Yeah.
The Ghost Kingdom. So our little fantasy about them was she was the head cheerleader and he was the head football player, and they fell in love and they had this little romance, and they both wanted to go to college. And
They were
so
so young.
they were so young and they had this future. And I think, because we were in probably our tween years when we came up with all this stuff, it made us feel better. It made us feel better that this was the choice made for us and we could understand their ambitions or whatever. When we found out in our 50s that they were adults and they couldn't figure out how this happened, but also how to make it work out. And most of it had to do with religion because they were different religions.
Mhm.
Really?
It just burst my bubble. I thought, I had a hard time getting used to the reality of all this. I
It
like
makes
the
it a lot
fantasy.
harsher, right? It makes it a lot harsher. There's something
Yeah.
before you picture just this, oh, I don't know. We do that to ourselves, but then when you think about what actually took place that day, those months,
Yeah.
it's surprising.
And it's not an uncommon thing with those of us from the closed adoption era. We have no information, and our identity, our little psyche is trying to work through that, how to make us feel better about this lack of information. And so we make up these little stories
Right.
that make us feel better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's totally normal. So many people have done that,
Yeah.
Well, we say this often, the two biggest pastimes in this country are gardening and ancestry. So why wouldn't we have those feelings as children, wondering where we came from, especially when you're not given any information? Oh, your birth mother was young, athletic, pretty, like the arts, really
Yeah, like
generic
the arts.
information.
And your birth father wore glasses.
Right.
That's all you got.
Your birth father was tall,
Yeah, I got tall and
Yeah,
handsome.
I got tall too.
I think that was it.
Yeah. My parents were told that we were from the same ethnicity too, German and Irish, but I think they must have told everybody that because those were more acceptable heritages to have to say your kids are, they're German and Irish like us. And one of the fascinating things that came out of my search for my birth parents was my birth father is a quarter Chippewa.
Oh,
He's from northern Minnesota. He grew up a poor kid right off outside the reservation. And so this whole identity piece of being enough Chippewa, enough American Indian that I was not privileged to that information isn't just another little, I don't know, nail in the coffin about the closed adoption thing. I'm still troubled by getting my head around being culturally something different than what I was raised. It's a real identity thing. Here's another insult to the whole conversation about Native American or not having your father's name on your birth certificate. So I thought, wow, this is so cool. Maybe I want to become a member of the White Earth Nation. And I did research into it, and I can't be a member because my birth father's name is not on my birth certificate.
Mm.
And they can't amend that even with DNA or anything?
Well, they don't recognize DNA yet.
Okay.
And I have heard of a couple of cases where adoptees have gone before a judge and said, this is criminal that I don't have my birth father's name on my birth certificate. This is his name. I have DNA to prove that he is my birth father. I want my birth certificate amended to put his name on there. So I just was talking to my twin sister about this, and she goes, I'm up for the challenge. Are you up for the challenge? Let's see how far we can go with it.
I might do that too.
Yeah.
Why
I think
not?
you should. I mean, honestly, did you see that we had a guest on Crystal Park? Did you hear hers? And she had, because She's Adopted, the documentary, where she finds out also she's Native American. She knew she was, but
She's Canadian.
Canadian, but she learns
Oh, okay.
her, oh yeah, sorry, Native Canadian. And she learns her identity through it because she gets to travel there and meet people. And I think it's really, you should watch that.
Yeah,
It'll
I will watch
inspire
that
you.
one. That one I missed. I
Yeah.
love the episode about the gal from the UK, but she was born in New Zealand, I think.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah, she was telling your story for the first time to both
Simone.
of.
Simone,
Yes,
yeah.
Simone. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you went on this journey and you found her, and how was that for you?
Well, it was a painful process because she said no right off the bat.
Oh,
We
Mhm.
scared an intermediary contacted her, and we scared her. She had thought her secret was locked down. She was
yeah.
mad at Catholic Charities that her information was opened up. It was opened up under judge's court order on my behalf because of my health situation. And it took her a while to ask the questions. Well, why are they contacting me now? And once she supplied the health history, she still sat on it. She'd never told her husband,
Oh,
and he was a widower, and he had 3 adopted kids. So once she told him, of course he was open and receptive because he understood how, as an adoptive parent, how important the contact is. So yeah,
it's out of fear. I mean, it is another
yes,
fear of rejection on her part. They also have
yeah.
the rejection, right?
Or
So,
And so once,
she just buried it and did not want to
yeah.
deal. That's,
Yeah.
maybe not, that's really maybe more what
yeah.
happens too is
Yeah.
So once she told him, then my sister and I talked to her on the phone. Wow, was that a cool experience? All those years and hearing your birth mom's voice on the
Oh,
phone.
I like that.
It was
Yeah.
just, I have an essay in my second book, Belonging Matters. It's called The Happiest Moment, and it's about talking to her on the phone for the first time and hearing her voice. Another fantasy that you just don't think
Right.
ever is going to come true, and it did. I have a good relationship with her now. I've met a lot of my aunts and uncles and first
and
cousins
did
that,
they so they didn't know about you. She kept it secret from everybody.
yeah. And there's still some, she's one of 13. So there's still
Okay.
some relatives I haven't met. Some of them she feared telling because they would judge her
Mhm.
harshly. They're staunch Catholics. So they would have judged her harshly. But, the pain that she must have felt every year after year on Mother's
Yes.
Day, not to be able to say, I'm a mom too.
Your
Um,
birthdays. I
yes,
mean,
well, our birthdays are still
yeah.
wrought with so much conflict for her and for us. I had a beautiful thing happen a year ago. My youngest grandson was born on my birthday, and my twin sister's birthday, obviously, too. And I talk a lot about we're born on February 11th, which is the feast of Our Lady of Lourdes, an
Mhm.
important person in the Catholic faith. And there's a tie-in with my adoptive parents that I talk about in my next book. So to have a, a grandson sharing my
Yeah,
birthday was
makes it a
a big
different
thing.
day.
Yeah, it makes it a really special
February
day.
11th is my adopted mom's birthday. So I knew
Ah,
about that feast just because we were
yeah.
Episcopal, little diet
Okay.
Catholic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow. So this is interesting. It's still ongoing because I do like that you have your siblings on your father's side.
hmm
You did get
Yeah.
something from that. And they're
Where does
neat.
everybody live in relation to you?
Well, my half brother and sister live in the Chicago area. My twin sister lives also not far from me, like a mile away. And the siblings that I grew up with, who embraced this whole journey,
Oh,
they
good.
were really
Yeah.
excited for my sister and I to know our birth relatives, particularly since they already knew my brother or knew
Right.
of my brother. That one was easy. So my brother, that's 2 years younger, the adopted brother that I'm not biologically related to, went down this path watching
That's what I was
me.
going to ask. Did he get to do
Y-
this?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was part of this Catholic Charities post-adoption support group in Chicago. I got really involved in it in that time period, that heartbreaking time period when my birth mom said, no, I don't want anything to do with these girls before we were entered reunion. And so these support groups were made up of adoptees in search and reunion, but also birth mothers
Mm.
and the adoptive parents that were supporting their adopted child through the process. And I dragged my brother with me. And for 2 years, we went to these meetings together, and he was on the fence, on the fence. I don't know, Jules. I don't know if I can do it. You've gone through so much. I'm listening to all these people going through so much. And then he did it. He used the same intermediary, and he found 4 sisters, all pretty local in Wisconsin, which is, less than an hour from Chicago. And they were so excited to meet. They wanted a brother their whole life, and here he was. He never got to
Good.
meet his birth mom. She had Alzheimer's, and
Mm.
she was in a decline, so he
Mm.
never got to meet her. But
So many of these stories with that have these types of endings,
Late.
waiting too long and
mhm.
very
Yeah,
sad.
but he's in constant relationship with his sisters. I've met his sisters. It's really a great
It is.
outcome.
Yeah, it is a good
Yeah,
outcome.
yeah.
And that
Yeah.
your family's supportive on both sides and your adopted mother
Eventually.
is eventually
Right.
Eventually.
the siblings. It's nice to
Eventually.
have a little bit of support. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. My
Boy, that
half
I
brother.
just think of that religious indoctrination though
Yeah, it's
about
just hard.
how oh it's so wrong to premarital
Yes.
sex of that era, like and the lack of self-awareness of
How?
everybody has these feelings and these urges and just the propaganda anyway.
Yeah. And those poor girls having to go away
Oh,
and
I
hide
know.
and have their babies and come back and get back into life as if none of that ever happened.
Mm-hmm.
Such a disservice to them. I mean, we have come so far in society,
Um,
gratefully. Wow.
no, not so much. We're
Well, for
reading.
single, I meant for single women
Oh,
raising
yes.
a child by
yes.
themselves. That we
Yes.
have come so far in that respect. And
In that respect, yes. But still there's a lot of pressure and adoption practices haven't, have changed, but they're almost more nefarious.
mhm.
Um, anyway.
And I also think there's still judgment out there, honestly, for young women. I have a friend, a person I know is dating a young woman with a daughter, and she was a single mom. And I'll get interesting questions about that, like, oh, and you're thinking, yeah, and
Mhm.
that's okay. I still think it's out there, actually. I think we just say it's a little bit better, and more people are open-minded, but I still think there's a lot of judgment around things. It's going to take
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Well, this has really been great. It's so nice to meet you and look forward to your third book.
I know.
Thank you.
And
Thank
by the
you.
way, we
So
like signed copies for our library.
yes,
We
we
really
do
wish we had a
Oh, I would
library.
love that. I will
we
send you some.
A little
we have
pandering for that.
an adoptee library. I have a whole bookshelf
We do.
dedicated
I
at
me
this
too.
point. So
Okay. Well, we'll exchange address so I can send you some signed copies. That'd be
Thank
fun.
you. Yeah,
absolutely. I'm so happy to have heard your story and
me
that
too.
and again, really glad you have your sister. That's a nice
Well,
bond.
Yeah.
it is, and I'm grateful for being able to talk to you, ladies, and for the work that you're doing out in the community, letting adoptees share their story and perspectives. I think we learn so much from each other. It
We
gives us
do.
We do.
a lot of courage and inspiration to kind of deal with the struggle that we battle within.
Thank
Every
you.
adoptee should, if they want, have a space to tell their story and also to write their story. So I'm glad
Yes.
that you're doing that too,
Yeah.
So thank you, Julie. So nice
Thank
to
you,
meet you.
Julie.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Louise.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.